Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Conference Room. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. Joining me on the program today is Congress Member of Parliament, former Union Minister, seasoned diplomat, also author of 16 books, prolific Twitter user with more than 4 million followers. He's also a globally recognized speaker on various issues, politics, human rights, also freedom of the press, culture, international affairs. Before we embark on a freewheeling conversation with him, here's a short report on him and his work so far.
Shashi Tharoor is a member of the Indian Parliament and also a columnist, author, human rights activist and a former UN envoy. Born in 1956 in London, Shashi Tharoor began his political career in the UN in 1978 and served there for 29 years. His political journey in India began when he contested in the 2009 elections by joining the Congress party from Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. He won the elections with a margin of over 1 lakh votes and went on to become the Minister of State for External Affairs. He is passionate about politics and has been writing for newspapers like the Washington Post, the Times of India, New York Times, The Hindu, and many more. He has also written fiction and non-fictions, which have been translated into many languages. He is known as a compelling speaker and has won many awards. It's the suaveness of his approach and unflinching self-confidence that has won the hearts of many.
So what Shashi Tharoor sees himself as a writer, as an academic, as a politician, or as a diplomat? Thanks very much, Mr. Tharoor, for joining us in this program. Joining us on the program is also our two experts today. With us, senior editor from Indian Express, Liz Matthew. Thanks very much, Liz, for joining us here. Also, correspondent at New York Times, Hari Kumar. Thanks very much, Mr. Kumar, for joining us here. Also, my colleagues who are ready with their incisive questions. Thanks very much, friends, for joining us here. So, what Shashi Tharoor sees himself as an academic, as a politician, as a diplomat, or as a writer?
Well, as a human being, I hope, with a number of responses to the world, some of which I reflect in my work, some of which I reflect in my writing, some of which I reflect in my politics. So it's all the same person. It's just different facets, if you like, of responding to the realities I see around me.
Now, you're very international in nature. You were born in London, then you started in Kolkata, also Delhi,
Mumbai, Kolkata, college in Delhi.
US, then also you worked at several places. So how deep are your roots to India?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. Because I was born in England, I was entitled to a British passport. To this day, I've never exercised that entitlement. Even when they started imposing visa requirements on Indians, which they didn't initially. A British consul actually mischievously said to me, you know, a passport is only £15, your visa is going to cost you £65. I said, no, I'll pay the 65 because it's a principle. I look in the mirror, I see an Indian. And as far as I'm concerned, my commitment to this country is something that was there throughout even my service abroad. I didn't emigrate. I happened to be posted in different places. The UN put me in Geneva, put me in Singapore, put me in New York, sent me out to various places around the world, including dealing with the war in Yugoslavia, dealing with the refugee crises in Africa. Ultimately, the world is mine because as an Indian, I feel that spirit of internationalism, which is so deeply, I think, part of our nationalist movement. Even during the freedom struggle, our leaders never spoke of India only for itself. They always saw India in a global context. And so I don't see any contradiction between my global past and my Indianness. Okay, so and I'm very proud to remain that.
Okay, so precisely you're saying you're deeply rooted. And if I can just quote you, if America is a melting pot, then to me India is the thali, a selection of sumptuous dishes in different bowls. Each tastes different and does not necessarily mix with the next, but they belong together on the same plate and they complement each other in making the meal a satisfying repast. This is what you said. So India's strength is its plurality? Totally.
I'm a big believer in the whole cliche of unity in diversity. I believe we are one civilization, but our civilization is made up of very many manifestations. And that all the differences of class, creed, caste, color, culture, conviction, cuisine and custom still don't prevent us from achieving a basic democratic consensus. And that consensus ought to be on the principle that we don't really need to agree all the time, so long as we agree on the ground rules of how we will disagree. To my mind, that's the strength of India. We are a plural civilization, a plural polity, a plural nation, but even though the singular thing about India is that you can only speak of it in the plural, we can dream the same dreams together, acknowledging our common destiny and our shared history.
And does that disagreement prompted you to write this book?
My latest book?
Yeah.
Well, you know, my latest book was not so much sparked by disagreement, but by a surprising degree of agreement, in the sense that when I made that speech, I honestly didn't put a lot into it. This is stuff that I thought I knew and had read and so on since my school days. But the way in which it went viral on YouTube, and everybody up to and including the speaker and the prime minister happened to say good words about it, and even my habitual right-wing critics or BJP critics on social media paused in their usual attacks to praise me, I suddenly realized there's this entire sort of widespread feeling in India that this is stuff that everyone felt they should have known. Now, I too felt they already knew it, but I was wrong. They didn't know it, and therefore when my publisher said, will you write a book? I initially said, but why bother? Doesn't everyone know this? And he said, if they had known it, your speech wouldn't have gone viral. So it was new enough to them, you needed to revive it. So it wasn't disagreement particularly that sparked.
There are many of us who actually believe, and all of us have actually, born with a colonial hangover. So this whole belief that from the primitive people, they actually got us into the next age, Indian civil services, railways, tea, cricket, and many such things. Be it your talk at the Oxford or also this particular book, the basic question that comes in that why, previously historians didn't really talk about it.
Well, I think partly we as a culture are all too willing to forgive and forget. So when the independence, despite the savage partition that midwifed the nation into being, was actually accomplished with very little rancor or none at all. India remained in the British Commonwealth, even though it became a republic later, it stayed in the Commonwealth. We carried on many of the British institutions of governance. We are meeting in the parliament built by the British. We have preserved the civil service as the administrative service, the army, the police, and so on. So in many ways, we have continued the state they had built here to oppress us. And therefore, you can't blame any particular Indian or sets of Indians for it. It simply is the way we are. My argument in this book is I want Indians to forgive, because I don't see much point in continued bitterness or recrimination. But I don't want them to forget. Because what I say to young people is, if you don't know where you've come from, how will you appreciate where you're going? Know the past, but don't keep on holding it as a grudge.
Why then, if you really think that one should forgive, a British Prime Minister must apologize for Jallianwala Bagh massacre?
How do you forgive people who haven't apologized?
Okay, so how do you forgive people who haven't apologized?
I mean, the truth is that I don't think it's going to happen. As a very senior, very highly placed Englishman, whom I can't name because it was a private conversation, said to me, we'll never apologize, because if we apologize to you, we'd have to apologize in 130 other countries.
Okay.
Now, that is an exaggeration, because one of the points, and it goes back to your earlier question, is that India wasn't a primitive place. It wasn't like Singapore, a barren rock. It wasn't like Australia, a vast trackless desert inhabited by people who hadn't really mastered many of the arts of modern civilization. It was an advanced civilization. It was one of the richest countries in the world. As of 1700, it was the richest, 27% of global GDP. Even in 1800, it was the second richest, 23%. So the British came, conquered a country which was one of the most richest, most prosperous countries in the world, and in 200 years of loot, exploitation, and British rule, reduced it to one of the poorest countries in the world.
Right, but the sad irony of the whole situation is when we talk about the British Empire, it's not just about the colonization, but also, as you rightly said earlier, about the colonization of the mind. So when we look at Britishers, we look at them through a sense of aspiration, not through a sense of tyranny. Even till today, look at many of these matrimonial ads, which talks about, fair girls, and everything fair is good. So, how do you really handle the colonization of the mind? But this goes,
No, and that goes back right into the colonial thing, because the whole experience of imperialism was meant to be to inspire awe and reverence in the minds of the colonized. I've quoted in the book this anecdote I read about an Indian visiting England for the first time in the 1890s, and he comes back and says, wow, what an amazing country, even the shoeshine boys are British. I mean, as if British can only be lords and masters, and that sort of thing. This whole perception that this is a country that has produced a sort of ruling race.
Right, so what it really takes to change the perception. I'll have to start taking questions now from my colleague Anurag, yes.
Do you find the kind of debate which is going on at the moment in the country about the rewriting history, will it be good in terms of the people who didn't know or the forgot about our past? How do you find this kind of debate?
History, to my mind, has always been contested territory. So the fact that people have different versions of history is not, to me, problematic, provided there is respect for facts. That is that, as the cliche now goes, facts are sacred, opinions are up to you, but you can choose. I mean, I have chosen the facts to make my argument. Somebody might find other facts to contradict mine, and that's a legitimate basis for contestation. But when there is a project to sort of rewrite Indian history for the greater glory of a certain version of the past, and where those who are doing so, unfortunately, elide the truth in some of their fantasies, then you have a different problem. I'll give you one concrete example. I myself have written years ago, before I even came into politics, about the glories and achievements of ancient Indian science, mathematics, medicine, etc. But these real achievements, and these are extraordinary achievements, I mean, Aryabhatta anticipated Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, and so on by centuries. The Rig Veda describes gravitation in terms that are entirely sort of acceptable today, 1500 years before the apple fell on Newton's head. So you're talking about a civilization that had really, and Shushruta invented surgery. The world's first recorded plastic surgery took place in India. All this is true. But when you start talking about Pushpak Vimans flying in the air in Vedic times, you sort of say things like Ganesha's head being grafted on a human neck shows the advances in plastic surgery, then you actually discredit even the real facts. Because these things are so obviously false and laughable that anybody who knows anything knows these things are not true, that immediately the things that were true also get diminished in the process.
Many Indians knows about the Jallianwala Bagh and any other things, but they didn't know about the Winston Churchill, the kind of the criminal indifference he showed and he did, the Bengal famine. Yeah. So we should be knowing about it, and
even Jallianwala Bagh, I think most of us don't know the kind of details that I've deliberately brought out in the book, because there was even more. I mean, not only was the massacre awful, the aftermath of the massacre is what, to my mind, really made it the single worst episode. Killings took place. In fact, I don't know, perhaps a lakh of people were killed in Delhi in 1858 after they put down the so-called mutiny. Jallianwala Bagh, fewer people were killed than were killed in Delhi after the Sepoy mutiny. But the sheer brutality and racism accompanying it, the bodies of the dead, the dying and the wounded all left to lie unattended for 24 hours, relatives not even allowed to go in with a glass of water as the dead were dying, were mourning. Horrendous stuff like that. Then Indians made to crawl on a street on their bellies, and if they lifted their heads, they were hit on the head with lathis. This is the kind of thing that happened. And then on top of all that, the British collect money to reward Dyer with the equivalent of what's £250,000 in today's money. And then, you know, Rudyard Kipling, that flatulent voice of Victorian imperialism, hails him as the man who saved India. So this entire thing taken together is what makes Jallianwala Bagh to me horrible. Churchill, I agree with you. He is being hailed in the West as an apostle of freedom and democracy. Right. He was an insufferable racist, a cruel man who deliberately diverted grain supplies from Bengal while people were starving. 4 million people died in the Bengal famine. And even then, not only were supplies taken out of Bengal and sent to Europe, they were sent, by the way, not even to feed people, but to build up buffer stocks in the event of a future invasion of Greece. Ships from Australia laden with wheat were sailing past and stopping at Calcutta port. They were not allowed to unload their wheat. Okay. And when an English official wrote to London saying, do you realize that your policies are causing these deaths? All Churchill could do was write in the margin, why hasn't Gandhi died yet?
This rose-tinted view of the empire, you know, completely glossing over the atrocities and of course the injustices. But as you mentioned Vedic literature, you've also said that Ramayana and Mahabharata should be taught in schools. There's a need for Indianization of education system. How do you really think that the future generation will compare themselves with the Western world? Why did you say that in the first place?
You know, we can certainly face the Western world with confidence. I mean, let us by all means continue to study Shakespeare, but let us also study Kalidasa. Why is it that, you know, a man, unfortunately a much smaller percentage of his work has survived, perhaps as little as 5% of Kalidasa's writings have actually survived to be read today. But even though I can't read Sanskrit well enough, and I can read English translations, you can see the genius of the man. This is in no way inferior. Every line, every metaphor, every idea is in no way inferior to the best of Shakespeare. So why is it that every Indian child going to an English medium school anyway knows Shakespeare but knows nothing about Kalidas? Mahabharata and Ramayana to me should be taught the same way that the Iliad and the Odyssey are taught in Western schools. They are part of a civilizational heritage. Yes, some people associate them only with the Hindu faith. Yeah. I think they're wrong. They should be told, look, these are amongst the great compositions of this soil that you belong to 3,000 years ago. Read them in that spirit. No one's asking you to worship Ram. No one's asking you to,
so it should not be just seen as religious texts.
It should be treated as a civilizational document. Just as people read the Iliad and the Odyssey and they're not worshipping those Greek heroes or gods anymore.
Okay, talking about nationalism, because in the last few months we have seen the big debate and we see some sort of a proprietorship on the very concept and definition of nationalism, the us and them of nationalism. Do you think that, we have seen parties now, trying to, appropriate, historical figures and the reasons behind that? What is the very definition of nationalism for you?
No, to me, to my mind, I think everyone who loves his or her own country is bound to be to that degree nationalist. But to make nationalism the preserve of one particular political tendency or party is, to my mind, unacceptable. Because that serves a very petty political purpose. To say that because what we're doing in the interest of the nation, by opposing us, you're also opposing the nation, you're anti-national. That, to my mind, is extremely dangerous as a form of politics in any democracy. Democracy must accept and embrace the legitimacy of opposition. And that's what this, there's a famous line that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. And the scoundrel's way of brooking no opposition is by garbing themselves only in patriotism. I believe that we can all be patriotic. I've said in a public forum not long ago, I've often said Bharat Mata Ki Jai, but I will not say so because somebody tells me to say it.
Okay, and the main difference between the Congress and the BJP lay in their very different views on nationalism. Liz, your question you wanted to ask.
Yeah, like you said, there is a thin line between what you call culture and what you are perceiving as like nationalism. So like when parties and now you're seeing in even the personalities trying to misuse it, what can be done according to you? Like what can be done to protect it? Actually, the people, especially young generation, you do not see the difference between nationalism and even the liberty, the sense of liberty when you are talking about, they don't believe in that. Like you said, that I may say, I will say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, but why should I say in between? So that thing is getting confused here, the nationalism and even the personal liberty. So how do you make people understand this?
You're totally correct. In fact, I say to people, you have the right to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai and you have the right not to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. That's what democracy is all about. That's what your personal freedom is all about. I must say that only a process of political education can teach them that. And that comes from a number of things. It does come in the schoolroom, from your civics textbooks, your history textbooks, and so on. It also comes from our public life. If people in authority start saying that a particular point of view is unacceptable and anti-national, that confuses children. You're quite right. They think, oh my God, is it wrong to oppose? We're talking about India, but look at what's happening right now with Mr. Trump. I have, friends, Indians obviously, who are thinking they should delete their Twitter accounts before flying to America in case the immigration officers look at their negative tweets on Mr. Trump. This kind of fear. This is wrong. I think the entire point about being a democracy is that you actually encourage all points of view and that those points of view are yours, you're entitled to hold them, and you're entitled to change them.
Okay. Bhavna, your question.
Yeah, as you just mentioned about Trump, this new US president has just said about United Nations that it's just a club of few people, and in that club we just talk together. So you were also in the UN, and India has long been trying to get a permanent seat there. So what do you think? What are the hitches, and what can be done to get the permanent seat there?
Right. Well, first of all, on Mr. Trump, all I can say is I was, in my 29-year UN career, I spent 18 at UN headquarters. I've never seen Mr. Trump walk into the building, even though he was not very far away. However, he did take the UN location to his real estate advantage by building a building called the Trump World Tower to cash in on its proximity to the UN and sell apartments to embassies. So, I mean, the less said about that, the better perhaps, but that's the reality. Now, on the question of the permanent seat, this has been going on now for 25 years. I still remember Secretary General Boutros Ghali saying that he wanted Security Council reform to be done in time for the 50th anniversary of the organization. Now, the 50th anniversary has gone by, the 60th has gone by, the 70th has gone by, and there seems to be no reform around the corner. The problem is there isn't enough political will amongst those at the top. The 5 permanent members right now, even those who are rhetorically committed to, say, seeing India in the Council, are not committed to any particular formula and are certainly not going to lift any diplomatic muscle to get it done. So even when Mr. Obama came here and said, you know, we support India's admission into the, to the Security Council as a permanent member, was any instruction sent to American ambassadors around the world saying, please go and tell every country you're accredited to support this? No way. It was just a rhetorical gesture. And that is essentially what has been happening throughout. So we are in the maddening position where no one, very few countries, China and Pakistan to some degree, very few countries have expressed any reservations about us coming into the Council, but it just doesn't seem to happen. There's a very high threshold to amend the UN Charter, and that threshold requires a 2/3 majority of the member states of the UN, plus whatever they vote has then got to be ratified by 2/3 of the parliaments in the world, including those of all 5 permanent members. Now the problem is, in other words, you need a formula that is simultaneously acceptable to 2/3 of the world and is not unacceptable to the 5 countries whose powers will be diluted.
Right.
Imagine how difficult it is to find such a formula. For 25 years they've tried without success.
And for long we have debated on the sort of reforms which are required in the United Nations. As a former Under Secretary General of the United Nations, how do you really look at the very relevance of such multilateral platforms now? Because there's a big debate on whether we should go for these multi-level platforms and the very failure of United Nations in tackling this global fight against terror.
No, but you know, that's unfair because the UN has accomplished a great deal. I mean, I want to quickly tick it off. It prevented a 3rd World War, essentially, because it was the one platform where we could actually prevent the Cold War from turning hot. It diffused a number of crises around the world. The whole invention of UN peacekeeping by Hammarskjöld was a way of doing precisely that. It really set the development agenda. India led the decolonization effort at the UN that freed so many countries around the world. The UN was in the forefront of the struggle against apartheid. It has not been very successful in disarmament, but at least it set certain goals for the world. And at the same time, it continues to be the sort of state-of-the-art thinking on a number of major issues. Today we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Yesterday we've talked about the environment. The day before yesterday we talk about aging, urban habitats, all sorts of issues. When the UN convenes a conference, you get the top sort of global agenda-setting expertise on these subjects. So the UN is really very, very useful. However, it can't solve everything because it's like a mirror of the world. It reflects our agreements and disagreements. It reflects our abilities to get together when there is a platform provided for us to get together, but it also reflects our inability to get together.
Right, but still no
and
fixed
when
definition
states
on
agree,
terrorism.
when states agree, things can be solved. On terrorism, we can't even agree on a definition. Why? Because there are certain countries, let's put it very bluntly, who are opposed to certain kinds of state action in the name of combating terrorism that they believe hurts causes dear to them. So some of the Arab countries say state terrorism because they mean Israel. The Pakistanis are trying to label us with the same thing over Kashmir. And they want an exemption for legitimate freedom struggles, whatever those may mean. Whereas our argument, and the Americans and others are all saying, that there is no excuse for terrorism, whatever the cause.
Okay.
If you have a freedom struggle, pursue it legally and lawfully and peacefully. But if you use terrorism, then you're delegitimized by the convention.
So will it be
that some countries are not
So
agreed.
will it be correct to say that all this talk about global fight against terror is just a sham because countries are largely driven by national interest? Also, what is Shashi Tharoor's take on Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy? We'll talk all about that also on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Conference Room, and joining us on the program today is Shashi Tharoor. Let's ask him his take on Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy. Coming back to you, Mr. Tharoor, what do you really think of Prime Minister's foreign policy? Do you really see a paradigm shift in our approach if one talks about Pakistan, most importantly, isolating them diplomatically at international fora, at all the multi-level platforms, and also you wanted to make a comment on war on terror?
On terror, I just want to say that you concluded the previous segment by saying there isn't a global war on terror. That's not true. There is, but it's being prosecuted by individual countries, sometimes in cooperation with each other. Even we get some cooperation from some of the Western anti-terrorist intelligence services and so on. But I would agree with you that the UN doesn't provide an effective platform against it because, frankly, that's not what the UN was set up for in the first place. But we can come back to the UN some other time. On Mr. Modi, with foreign policy, I would say that he has brought an amazing amount of personal energy to his conduct of foreign policy. There is a lot of commitment there to sort of zip around the world. I lost track of how many countries he's been to, but it's over 50 by now, I think. And that's I think, to the credit of the Prime Minister. I also don't see a very major paradigm shift in that most of his policies represent a continuation of the previous government's policies. But that's, again, not surprising because, frankly, in our country, our political differences have always stopped at the water's edge. There's no real such thing as a Congress foreign policy and a BJP foreign policy. There is Indian foreign policy. And all Indians, I think, support that. Now, there have been some differences of emphasis. And I must say that on Pakistan, our biggest concern with Prime Minister Modi's policy was the extraordinary level of incoherence to it. Right. The alternation between welcoming the Prime Minister to his inauguration, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, giving him saris and shawls for his mother and so on. Within 1-2 months, we are firing artillery across the line of control on the border with the Pakistanis. There's back and forth. One day you're arranging talks here, the next day you're cancelling them because the Pakistanis meet with the Hurriyat.
Also?
Well, the previous government, I think, had a very different approach. The approach is very clearly, we want peace with Pakistan. And the BJP took credit for holding the government back. The BJP to this day says that the only reason that Dr. Manmohan Singh didn't go to Pakistan when he wanted to was because we prevented him, saying you can't go until you have specific deliverables and achievables. But Mr. Modi went. What did he get in terms of achievement? He got a lunch at a wedding, and thereafter, within a short while, we had the disgraceful episode of Pathankot. We again reached out to the Pakistanis to come and send a team here. We even showed an airbase to Pakistani intelligence in the process. And what cooperation have we got from them at all? Nothing. Zero.
The only commonality between our relations with Pakistan, be it the previous government or be it this government, is that there has been a series of flip-flops. You know, you don't really know what's happening. On one day, there's the foreign secretary level talks are happening. On the other side, so those the conditions are being laid out. The other government says the conditions. So there has been a series of flip-flops. But talking about politics specifically, a question from Mr. Sharma. Yes.
Mr. Tharoor, this is about the future of Congress. Slowly we are getting impression that the space vacated by Congress is slowly taken over by AAP. They are coming up in a big way in Punjab, that space was yours. They are coming up in a big way in Goa, that space was yours. They are likely to come up in a big way in Gujarat also in the coming election, that space was yours. So how do you see the future of Congress in that manner?
Well, let us not come to premature conclusions about the states you mentioned, because Punjab and Goa, the election results are yet to be tallied, and of course Gujarat is still some months away.
They are coming up in a big way.
Yeah, no, there is no doubt that they have also tapped into the very genuine discontent with our present ruling dispensation. But I think the difference between the Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress is, first of all, that we have a longer track record of experience in governance, a more coherent and fully fleshed set of policies. With the Aam Aadmi Party, by and large, we don't really know what they stand for. They're very good at telling you what they're against, particularly corruption or government high-handedness or high electricity bills or whatever. But as we've seen with their performance and governance in Delhi, it's very difficult to figure out what exactly they stand for and what exactly they're promising the people of India. I think, frankly, that to see the Aam Aadmi Party developing into a national rival of the Congress is a leap too far, because the Congress remains the only opposition party in the country with a nationwide footprint. Even when we suffered our worst ever election defeat in 2014, we won seats everywhere. We may have only won 1 or 2 where we used to win 12 or 20, but we were elected in the northwest and the southwest and the northeast and the center of the country, everywhere. There was no place where we were completely wiped out. We had something on the other. Okay, Rajasthan, I beg your pardon, we were completely wiped out, but by and large, We got a presence everywhere, and in Rajasthan, the indications are very high that we're going to come back at the next state elections, judging by the public opinion polls. So I believe it's too early to write an obituary for the Congress. When you look at the future, I think the future will lie with a younger generation of leadership. That's very clear now. The time for the torch to be passed is clearly coming. And it will also lie in the public perceptions of whether the BJP government and Prime Minister Modi personally have been able to fulfill their very, very clear promises in 2014. Mr. Modi promised jobs. Where are the jobs? I mean, these are some of the things. The Congress represents not just an alternative in terms of policies, but also in terms of style of leadership. Rahul Gandhi says, I don't know all the answers. I'm not even telling you I know all the answers. I'm not the man on the White Horse who's going to come here and cut through everything with a sword and solve your problems. But I'm willing to listen to you, and I'm willing to work with you to solve your problems. That message was not what the nation wanted in 14. It may be what the nation wants in 19.
But if I just interrupt you there are many who feel that, there's been tremendous media speculation in all these Chintan shivers that Rahul Gandhi will finally take over as the Congress president. And this, but that day didn't really happen. And all this Chintan shivers introspection. My colleague Suraj wants to ask a question also on the fact that Congress has never been able to stand on its own feet, even in the Hindi belt. Talk about Bihar and UP elections. Why you always come across as a junior ally? Also in West Bengal with the left, also in Tamil Nadu with the DMK. Your question there.
सर, जैसे नताशा ने कहा, बिहार में आप महागठबंधन में तीसरे चौथे नंबर की पार्टी बन गए, उत्तर प्रदेश में भी आप जूनियर लेवल पे हो गए। कुछ चीज़ें जैसे प्रधानमंत्री और आप में समानता भी है। ट्विटर पे, सोशल मीडिया पे आप दोनों ही काफ़ी पॉपुलर है, करोड़ों फॉलोवर हैं आपके, मगर आपके पार्टी उपाध्यक्ष जो हैं वो ट्विटर हैंडल भी ऑफिस टू आरजी करके चलाते हैं। उनके नारे जो होते हैं, जैसे आप भी स्टाइल आइकॉन की तरह ही माने जाते हैं पॉलिटिक्स में, प्रधानमंत्री मोदी भी अपने स्टाइल के लिए जाने जाते हैं, सूट बूट की सरकार टाइप के जुमले निकालना या नारे देना, या फिर विदेश नीति को लेकर, आप जानते हैं विदेश नीति को लेकर तो घूमना ही पड़ता है, फिर नारे देना कि भाई वो तो बाहर ही रहते हैं। इन सब चीज़ों को किस तरह देखते हैं आप?
देखिए, हम तो ओरिजिनल आम आदमी पार्टी है ना, इसलिए तो नेचुरली आम आदमी के लिए हम बोलेंगे आम आदमी तो सूट बूट नहीं पहनते हैं। जब प्रधानमंत्री ऐसे पहन के जाते हैं, और आपको याद है शायद वो ओबामा साहब के विजिट के टाइम पे, उस समय पे उसने वो जो सूट पहना था, वो 14-15 लाख के सूट, जिनका उसका नाम भी सिलाई की थी सारे स्ट्राइप्स में, तो उस वक्त ये सूट बूट का नेचुरली ये नारा मेरे ख्याल में बहुत इफेक्टिव रहा, बहुत लोग के मन में रहा।
सांप सपेरे वाले देश की अपनी इमेज से अगर हमारे प्रधानमंत्री एक अच्छा कपड़ा पहनते हैं, विश्व पटल पे अगर उसके नाम हो, तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है उससे? कुछ लगता है आपको शासन प्रणाली में कुछ फर्क पड़ जाएगा?
अच्छे कपड़े एक चीज़ होते हैं और 15 लाख का सूट दूसरी बात है। बस यही मैं कहूँगा, और अपना नाम सिलाई करना सूट पे, ये भी एक प्रश्न की बात है। लेकिन सोशल मीडिया पे राहुल गांधी कहते हैं कि देखिए, हम सब जानते हैं कि कई लोग हैं जिनके नाम पे ट्वीट्स आते हैं, लेकिन जो खुद नहीं लिखते हैं अपने ट्वीट्स को। मैं तो मेरा ही ट्वीट्स लिखता हूँ, लेकिन कई लीडर्स हैं जो जिनका ऑफिस उनका काम करते हैं, लेकिन उनके नाम पे जाते हैं। तो राहुल गांधी के सब लोग जानते होंगे कि मुझे इतना टाइम नहीं है करने के लिए, इसलिए अगर मेरे ऑफिस मेरे लिए ट्वीट कर रहा है तो मैं उसके लिए क्रेडिट नहीं लेना चाहता हूं। मैं चाहता हूं कि ऑफिस के लोग जाने कि वो लोग कर रहे हैं।
3 बजे लोकसभा में डेमोनेटाइजेशन पे बोलने वाले हैं, वो ट्वीट करते हैं, उसके रिट्वीट सैकड़ों में आ रहे हैं। तो अपनी बात को कहना और अपना दर्शक वर्ग है जिस तक पहुंचाना चाहते हो, कोई बुरी बात तो है नहीं। अगर
देखिए, मुझे तो कोई इतराज़ नहीं इसमें। आई बी वेरी हैप्पी टू सजेस्ट टू राहुल जी दैट ही शुड नाउ फाइंड द टाइम। लेकिन वो कह रहा था मुझे कि देखिए, मुझे टाइम नहीं है, और तो लोग जानते हैं कि मैं खुद नहीं लिख रहा हूँ, तो इसलिए होने दो कि किसी और के ऑफिस के नाम पे आने दो। सब लोग जानते हैं कि इनका अप्रूवल से ही आ रहा है, और द ट्वीट हैंडल स्पीक्स फॉर हिम। बस यही है। और बिहार यूपी के बारे में जो आप पूछ रहे थे, देखिए हमारी सरकार तो मेरे ख्याल में 90s तक चले, यूपी में तो 95 तक, बिहार में 90 या 91 तक। सही बात यह है कि पॉलिटिकल रियलिटीज बदल जाते हैं हमारे देश में, क्योंकि एक जो जाति के गठबंधन होते हैं, जो सोशल मूवमेंट्स बन जाते हैं, इसमें भी कोई चेंजेस आते हैं। और इसलिए अगर हम रियलिस्टिकली मान के समझ लें कि हमारे जो लास्ट 2-3 इलेक्शंस अगर आप एक एवरेज ले लीजिए, यूपी में हमें करीब 11-12% मिल रहे थे। तो ये 11-12% अगर हम सिर्फ दूसरे लेफ्ट ऑफ सेंटर या सेंट्रिस्ट पार्टीज़ के वोट को काट करें, तो अंत में कौन बेनिफिशियरी बन जाएगा? बीजेपी। इसलिए मेरे ख्याल में अच्छा किया कि समाजवादी पार्टी जो सोशलिस्ट है, हम भी सोशलिज्म के नाम में ही बात करते हैं, लग रहा है कि इतने ज़्यादा बड़ा फ़र्क नहीं है हमारे मूल्य में, हमारे
But Mr. Tharoor, would you really
values.
accept that Congress needs introspection at this time? The fact that it has come down to such numbers in the Lok Sabha and also its performance in
We've introspected enough. I think the introspection time was 2014, and arguably one more round of introspection after we got a bit of a beating in a number of state elections in 2016, including my own state. I think at that point, I myself said, including on Lok Sabha television, that now the time for introspection is over. The time has come for action, for reshaping and rebuilding the party. Already de facto, I think you've seen some changes. Though Rahul Gandhi remains vice president, he has de facto been functioning as the working president for some months now. And I think you're seeing the party. He has been very energetic in the last several months, traveling all over the country, putting his finger on many hot button issues. So as I said, I think we are going to see the Congress party really finding its natural place as the leading nationwide party in this country.
And as many of your colleagues has also said, not just introspection, but deep needed surgery, but remains to be seen whether this will really translate into the big results. Yes, your question, sir.
Tharoor Sahab, it has always been a pleasure listening to you. I will take you back in the past from this political discussion. You have spoken in that Oxford speech, which is the talking point of the whole world, and now a whole new book is there on that topic. My question goes back to even from that colonial rule of 200 years. My question is that what was the reason why this glorious country, since you have spoken at length about the past and the history and economy and culture of this glorious country, what went wrong? What were the reasons? What were the shortcomings? Why whoever came, conquered us, made us their colony and ruled us for thousands of years? And the second part of the question is that have we overcome those shortcomings? Can we say that in that past 70 years, have we overcome those shortcomings?
Yeah. Well, I think there were a number of historical reasons that you can analyze today. There was, at the time the British were making their advances, a dramatic loss of central authority in the country. The Mughal Empire had been dramatically weakened after the attacks of Nadir Shah in particular, which wiped out Delhi pretty much. The Marathas had made some advances, and they were defeated in 1761 by Ahmad Shah Abdali. There was no really very strong central power anymore. The Mughals had ruled through a system of having these various sort of satraps around the country. So you had sort of mini kings in terms of Nawabs and Nizams and so on in various places. They acquired more autonomy, but they were only interested in protecting their own domains. And when the British came, we were therefore a divided lot. And not only divided amongst ourselves in this way, but even within ourselves. So in each state there was betrayal. I mean, in the case of Siraj-ud-Dawla, you know how Mir Qasim paid the British to put him on the throne. I'm sorry, Mir Jafar. Then Mir Qasim paid the British to put him on the throne in place of Mir Jafar. Sorry, I'm going around in circles. Mir Jafar first, Mir Qasim replacing Mir Jafar, then Mir Jafar going back and giving more money to the British to replace Mir Qasim. Or if you look at Tipu Sultan, who was the most successful of the opponents of the British, what happened? He was also betrayed by a courtier. He had his wonderful impregnable fort at Seringapatnam, which I would recommend you see 8 kilometers from Mysore. It's surrounded by a moat full of water, crocodiles. The British could not invade. And what happened was that there was an attempt made to conquer him by the British forces. They couldn't get in. They instead bribed a courtier of his to allow them in under the water through the gate that is open to allow supplies coming in. With the result that when I went there, in fact, a tourist guide said to me, "Sir, second water gate, Washington. First water gate, Seringapatnam." Because through the water gate, these chaps came. So that is the situation. And then there was also one last thing, tactical advantage. The British had guns which were superior to ours. We had excellent swords superior to theirs, but guns unfortunately tend to defeat swords from a certain distance. And they had better military tactics. European military tactics were much more lean and efficient than the military tactics of our heavy heavy, big trains, sort of big collections of people going along with the army.
Right.
So
you still have to answer the second part of the question, that have we overcome those shortcomings? But can I say that lack of nationalism at that point of time, a sense of the unity of the country, that led to those all invasions, and anybody came and conquered us and made us their colony?
I'm not sure I would say that, because after all, everybody was trying to conquer their entire space that from the days of the Rig Veda has been known as Bharatvarsh. If you look at it, Ashoka and Chandragupta, 2,400 years ago, tried to establish a Mauryan empire across most of what is today India, plus Pakistan, Bangladesh, and bits of Afghanistan. The Guptas tried, didn't get that far. The Mughals controlled pretty much that much of territory, and then the British. So there was always this desire, it seems to me, to control the whole lot, but there were military limitations, communications limitations, transportation links problems. So inevitably it wasn't an easy task to control the whole country, but not because there was no national idea. I've always argued the idea of India goes back far, far, far before the British.
The idea of India was always there. Reading history is as tempting as hearing about it, but then of course there are other questions also. Vinod and Vikas. Yeah, Vinod, first your question.
क्या आपको लगता है कि ये गठबंधन के लिए राहुल गांधी अध्यक्ष बनना बहुत जरूरी है, या फिर आने वाले समय में आप क्या चाहते हैं कि राहुल गांधी कब तक अध्यक्ष बनेंगे?
Let me answer that in English to be precise. I would say that as far as coalition making is concerned, there is an increasing belief around the country that it would be healthy for the opposition to sink their differences rather than divide each other's votes. People are constantly reminded that the present government is in power on 31% of the vote in 2014. With 31% of the vote, they have over 60% of the seats in parliament, 65%. So the important thing from the opposition point of view is, if you can unite a majority out of that remaining 69%, you will win the seat. They will not win it. So do you want to divide yourselves? That is the first common sense question that lies behind the creation of the idea of coalitions. Thereafter, whether the coalitions will be pre-election, post-election, whether they will vary from state to state. The UPA, for example, was always a very loose federation. At the very time that Mr. Sharad Pawar's party was a member of my government here, they had a candidate against me in Thiruvananthapuram, because in Kerala, NCP is in the left front and not in the Congress-led UDF. So you could be statewide coalitions that would come together eventually at the end. All of this has to be decided. Then we could see who would be the convener. So then at the end of the coalition forming process, only then can you decide who should be the convener. Rahul Gandhi may find it better to leave it to somebody from one of the smaller parties to give them a sense of ownership. After all, when the NDA was first formed, it was Mr. Sharad Yadav who was the convener, not either Mr. Advani or Mr. Modi. Okay. So various possibilities are there.
Vikas, quickly your question.
Speculation today.
Yeah.
सर, मेरा सवाल केरला से जुड़ा हुआ है। 2009 के लोकसभा चुनाव में कांग्रेस की 13 सीटें थी और वोट परसेंट 40 था। 2014 के लोकसभा चुनाव में सीटें 8 हो गई और वोट परसेंट 31 हो गया। फिर भी कांग्रेस को लगा कि विधानसभा चुनाव में हम सरकार बनाएंगे, और 2016 के विधानसभा चुनाव में सीटें 22 हो गई। ऐसा क्यों?
नहीं, बात यह है कि केरला के विधानसभा इलेक्शंस में कई प्रॉब्लम्स थे, और एक प्रॉब्लम जो कई कांग्रेस सरकार को सहना पड़ा, इंटरनल डिसयूनिटी काफ़ी है। हमारे पार्टी के अंदर कभी कभी फैक्शंस होते हैं और आपस में जो लड़ाई होती है उसमें भी सफरिंग हो जाते हैं। 2014 में जनवरी तक हमारा डर यही था कि ये इंटरनल फैक्शनल क्वारल्स की वजह से हम शायद हारेंगे, लेकिन जनवरी में एक बहुत बड़ा मतलब पीस सेटलमेंट हुआ, सारे फैक्शंस एक साथ आ गए, और जब आप एक साथ लड़े में अच्छे सपोर्ट बेस के साथ काफ़ी, क्योंकि आपने कहा 8 सीट, लेकिन हमारे जो एलाइज हैं उनको भी सीट मिले हैं। मुस्लिम लीग को 2 मिला, केरला कांग्रेस को 1 मिला, मतलब अंत में हम 11-12 है इस लोकसभा में। तो मैं कहूँगा कि अगर हम हमारे इंटरनल इश्यूज़ को ठीक करके आगे बढ़ना कोशिश करें तो कोई कारण नहीं है कि कांग्रेस वापस नहीं आएगा केरला में।
Now, your appointment as a goodwill ambassador of the Swachh Bharat mission, became a big point, and there were many within the Congress extremely upset with that. Liz, your question related to that.
A lot of rumors that you would be shifting to BJP, maybe because of the views you are expressing about nationalism, about culture. Maybe people are misunderstanding that, or you are there reading the same line. Is there any basis for that? Because some of your actions in the House, well, sometimes twice you haven't walked out with the other party members.
No, I've always walked out. Okay, let me now go back on this very specifically. I am not switching parties. I do have my own beliefs and my own ideas. Swachh Bharat, I believed, was a non-political issue in the national interest and in the succession to a vision of Mahatma Gandhi's, who said before independence that sanitation is more important than independence, that every Congress government has led a sanitation program, including the UPA, and I felt it was a continuation of the same effort. But of course, the Prime Minister was giving it more visibility. Having said that, beyond Swachh Bharat, every other kind of statement that I've done, you've heard me talking today, I've been very critical of the government where I disagree with them. And by and large, I do disagree fundamentally with many of the party positions and the values of the BJP. So no, I'm remaining in the Congress. As far as walking out is concerned, I have walked out every time the party has walked out. I have not been very fond of disrupting the House.
Okay,
but even there, I have stood in the aisle with my colleagues to show my solidarity. I've never dissented from it.
Okay, so you're not switching parties. That's very well clear. Now, this government, do you think, is more blunt and forthright when we talk about surgical strikes, mentioning of Balochistan in the Independence Day speech, also the demonetization drive? Why would you really, hit yourselves just before the elections?
Yeah, I must say, I'm a big critic of demonetization. I spoke in the Lok Sabha until I was cut off by the acting speaker at the time, against it in very strong terms. But when it comes to what was the other issue particularly that you...
Surgical strikes.
Surgical strikes. I certainly understood that the government was doing something that had been done before, but for the first time was choosing to speak about it as a means of sending a signal to Pakistan, and I had no problem with that. When they started speaking about it for narrow political advantage within the country, that I have a problem with, because I don't believe that the army should be used for political purposes.
Right, but this whole debate of proof and evidence started by your party, isn't that a problem? Why are we actually even doubting our argument?
I have publicly at that time said very clearly, I trust the word of my army, I do not ask for any proof, and I think there were very few people, it was never a party position as such. I think the concern we had, very frankly, is that the kind of raid that took place cannot truly be called a surgical strike, which normally refers to precision bombing, frankly. That's what the phrase means. It was called this and it's stuck in the media's minds. Today, if I ask the government people, they say, but the media came up with the phrase, it wasn't us. I don't know. Secondly, as far as the Myanmar raid earlier was concerned, there are things you do for national security that you don't talk about. At this particular instance, I understood why the government talked about it, because the pressure within the country after Pathankot and Uri was so great on doing something that unless the government conveyed to the country that something had been done, they would not have been able to diffuse that pressure. So I understood the logic of their doing it, but I do not agree at all that we should make a habit of beating our chests in public. I believe that, as Theodore Roosevelt said, speak softly and carry a big stick and you will go far.
Okay, it's very difficult to compress all the facets of Shashi Tharoor in just 45 minutes of a program, but still Bhavna would want to ask a personal question. Yeah.
Yes, sir, as we are on the verge of winding up, and yes, I hope you won't mind that, but you're turning 61. And you're in the list of senior citizenship, but you are still considered a youth politician. How do you take that, and what is that energy secret? I must ask you. And how do you want to take this forward?
Well, look, as far as the question of seniority is concerned, somehow in our politics, it's those who have come into the party early and worked long who are considered senior. So clearly, my place in the pecking order as somebody who only joined politics in 2009 is way behind people who are 20 years younger than me but have been in politics for longer. That's the way our country works. I suspect that Dr. Manmohan Singh and others have been through similar problems when they first came into politics. One has to earn one's seniority the hard way by spending time doing it. But I think I have, by now, after all the initial troubles that you all chronicled in the media, I by now, I think, earned some acceptance even within my own party. On energy, I don't know, this is, all I say to people when they ask me about things like the way I look or the way I talk or the way I run or whatever, I just say, choose your parents wisely. Okay. I get no credit for it. It is your genetic heritage.
What next for Shashi Tharoor? What next for Shashi Tharoor from here?
Well, look, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very fulfilled right now in my role as chairman of the Standing Committee on External Affairs in Parliament, where we work very, very non-partisan across the party lines. I have a majority of BJP members in my committee, but we've never had a problem. We work very well together. I also, of course, have the opportunity to speak for my party in Parliament a number of occasions. What lies next, of course, will be the next general elections. Do I want to contest? Does my party want me to contest? What do I do? It's a tough question to which I don't have a final answer now.
Okay.
But all I can say is I will continue to serve the people of my constituency, Thiruvananthapuram, and to the extent I can, the people of India, with all the dedication and commitment I can muster.
Okay, and there are two questions I'm very, very curious about. First, which book you're currently reading? And second, which movie you saw last? Because you've also written a book on showbiz.
You know, I haven't been able to see movies for such a long time that it's getting embarrassing. Now, I used to watch movies on planes, but what happened was that nowadays I started taking my reading matter on planes because there's no time to read in my normal day. So now I only read on planes, I don't watch movies anymore. So it's really embarrassing. I would say that probably the last movies I saw were, so there was one weekend about a year and a half ago when I saw both Bajrangi Bhaijaan and Bahubali on the same weekend. And then that next week I was still in a movie watching mood and I saw Phantom, which I would also recommend very strongly. It was the only one of these three that flopped. It shouldn't have flopped. It's a terrific film. But anyway, as far as my books are concerned, I've just finished an interesting book called Selection Day by Arvind Adiga, which is about cricket and Mumbai slums and all of that. In the end, it turned out to be a bit bleaker than I would have liked, but very, very beautifully written, well written.
Thanks very much, Mr. Tharoor, for joining us in this program. I'm sure there are still many, many questions which everyone wants to ask here. But your quote where you have said, India shaped my mind, anchored my identity, influenced my beliefs and made me who I am. India matters to me and I would like to matter to India. So all the very best wishes to you as far as your future endeavors are concerned. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we have for you in this edition of Conference Room. Thanks very much for watching.